Amid the brutal heat and dense undergrowth of Luzon, in the final stretch of World War II, one U.S. Army handler lay wounded and helpless, and his dog refused to abandon him. While medics urged the canine to move, the dog stood firm, sensing something no human could. Moments later, a single bark shattered the silence and exposed a hidden Japanese sniper preparing for a kill shot. This is the powerful story of Rex, a war-trained German shepherd, and Sergeant Danny Brooks, a bond forged in battle, tested by fear and sealed by a life-saving act of instinct and loyalty. Some heroes walk on two legs, others never leave your side. If this moment gave you chills, imagine what's still to come. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and don't miss the rest of the powerful journey of Sergeant Danny Brooks and his canine partner, Rex, a bond tested by war, loyalty, and instinct. Their fight for survival has only just begun. The Philippine sun beat down mercilessly on the dense jungle of Luzon Island. January 1945 marked the beginning of the end for the Pacific War, but for the men of the 25th Infantry Division, each day remained a test of endurance and will. Among them, Sergeant Danny Brooks wiped sweat from his brow, his uniform clinging to his lean frame as he crouched beside his faithful companion. Rex, a 3-year-old German shepherd with intelligent amber eyes, sat alert at Danny's side. His coat gleamed chestnut and black, despite the oppressive humidity. His ears perked forward at the slightest sound. The dog's military training harness, marked with the K9 Corps insignia, was worn with the same dignity as any soldier's uniform. "What do you think, boy? Another long day ahead," Danny whispered, his Boston accent subtle but noticeable. At 28, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had found his purpose. Before the war, he'd been a mail carrier. Now he and Rex led scout patrols through some of the most dangerous terrain in the Pacific. Lieutenant James Wilson approached, his face etched with the perpetual concern of an officer responsible for too many young lives. "Brooks, you and Rex are with 1st Patrol. We're mapping the ridge approach before the main company moves through tomorrow." Danny nodded, running his fingers through Rex's thick fur. "We're ready, sir. Rex had a good night's rest, better than most of us." Wilson's expression softened momentarily. "That dog's instincts have saved more lives than our intelligence reports. Keep him close." The connection between handler and dog hadn't come easily. 8 months earlier at the K9 Training Center in Tennessee, Rex had been stubborn, reluctant to bond with any handler. Danny, with his infinite patience and steady demeanor, had been the one to break through. "He just needs someone to understand him," Danny had explained to the skeptical trainers. "He's not being difficult, he's being careful about who he trusts." Their first night together, Danny had slept on the concrete floor next to Rex's kennel, reading aloud from his pocket edition of Jack London's The Call of the Wild. By morning, Rex had moved to the kennel door, as close to Danny as the bars would allow. Now, thousands of miles from home in this sweltering jungle, that trust had deepened into something profound. Rex anticipated Danny's commands before they were given. Danny understood Rex's alerts, the different tension in his posture when he sensed water versus when he detected human presence. As the patrol prepared to move out, Private Thomas Rodriguez, a young replacement from New Mexico, barely 19 years old, watched the duo with undisguised admiration. "How do you do it, Sarge? That dog looks at you like you hung the moon." Danny smiled, checking his gear methodically. "It's respect, not magic. You respect them, they respect you. Rex knows I'd never leave him behind, and I know he'd do the same." The patrol moved out at 600 hours, 8 men and 1 dog disappearing into the emerald labyrinth of the Philippine jungle. Rex led the way, Danny keeping a loose hold on his lead. Behind them, the men moved in practiced formation, eyes scanning the dense undergrowth, the towering kapok trees, the tangled vines that seemed determined to reclaim any path humans tried to forge. 3 hours into their patrol, they reached a small clearing. The distant mountains of the Sierra Madre Range rose majestically beyond the canopy, deceptively peaceful from this distance. 10-minute break," Wilson ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The men sank to the ground, grateful for the momentary rest. Danny guided Rex to a patch of shade, offering him water from his canteen. The dog drank neatly, eyes never ceasing their vigilant survey of their surroundings. "You ever wonder what they think about?" Rodriguez asked, nodding toward Rex. "Like, does he understand what's happening? Why we're all here?" Danny considered the question seriously. Rex understands loyalty. He understands protecting his pack. Maybe that's clearer than why some of us are here. He stroked Rex's head gently. "Sometimes I think he sees things more honestly than we do." As the men prepared to continue their patrol, Danny felt a subtle change in Rex's demeanor, a slight stiffening, a focused attention toward the eastern edge of the clearing. Most would have missed it, but to Danny it was as clear as a shout. "Lieutenant," he said quietly, "Rex is picking up something to the east." Wilson hesitated, studying his map. "That's not our assigned route." "I understand, sir, but Rex hasn't been wrong yet." The lieutenant looked at the dog, then at the dense wall of vegetation to the east. After a moment's consideration, he nodded. "Brooks, take point with Rex. Everyone else tight formation." As they changed direction, following Rex's instincts rather than their orders, none of them could have known how this decision would test the bond between man and dog, a bond that would soon face its greatest challenge in the shadowed depths of the Luzon jungle. If you've been moved by this story of loyalty and connection during one of history's darkest periods, consider subscribing to our channel. Each week, we explore remarkable tales of courage and companionship that history has nearly forgotten. Join our community of history enthusiasts and be the first to experience these powerful stories that remind us what it means to be truly human, even in inhumane times. Subscribe now and never miss another chapter in our ongoing exploration of history's most touching moments. The eastern path led the patrol through increasingly difficult terrain. The jungle thickened, vines hanging like tentacles from ancient trees, the ground becoming treacherously uneven with hidden roots and sudden drops. Despite the challenge, Rex moved with unwavering confidence, occasionally looking back as if to ensure Danny was still following his lead. "Your dog seems mighty determined, Sarge," whispered Corporal Howard Mitchell, a former factory worker from Detroit, whose gentle, giant frame belied his meticulous attention to detail. "You think he's tracking something specific?" Danny watched Rex's body language, the slightly raised hackles, the deliberate paw placements. He's not tracking a person. More like, he senses a change in the environment ahead. Lieutenant Wilson checked his compass, frowning slightly. "We're approaching the edge of our operational boundary. Another mile and we'll need to turn back." The jungle suddenly opened into a narrow ravine, a natural corridor where the vegetation thinned enough to offer clearer visibility. A small stream trickled along its center, carving a path through moss-covered stones. Rex paused at the entrance, his posture alert but not alarmed. "Let's take 5 here," Wilson decided. "Mitchell, Rodriguez, secure the perimeter. Brooks, give Rex a break, but keep him close." As the men settled into their positions, Danny led Rex to the stream, allowing him to drink. The dog lapped at the water but remained unusually vigilant, his ears constantly shifting to track sounds beyond human perception. "What is it, boy?" Danny murmured, scanning their surroundings. The ravine walls rose about 20 feet on either side, creating a natural channel that funneled the humid air through like a breezeway. Something about the formation struck Danny as tactically significant. He approached Wilson, keeping his voice low. "Sir, this ravine feels like a natural pathway. If I were planning troop movements through this area, I'd mark this as a potential route." Wilson studied the terrain thoughtfully. "I see what you mean. Good high ground on both sides, access to water, and it seems to be heading in the direction of the Japanese last reported positions." He pulled out his map, marking their location. "This isn't on our charts as a significant feature." "Permission to check the length of it with Rex, sir. Just a quick recon." Wilson hesitated, then nodded. "Take Rodriguez with you. Stay within visual range." Danny motioned to the young private, and with Rex leading, they began moving carefully along the stream bed. The ravine curved gently to the north, the walls occasionally broken by smaller tributary gullies. Rex moved with purpose now, his steps quickening. "He's onto something," Danny told Rodriguez. "Stay sharp." Around the next bend, the ravine widened slightly before terminating at a rock face about 30 feet high. A small waterfall, hardly more than a trickle in the dry season, descended from above, feeding the stream they had been following. But what caught Danny's attention was the dark opening at the base of the cliff, a cave entrance partially concealed by hanging vines and ferns. Rex stopped 20 feet from the opening, his body language suddenly changing. His tail lowered, his muscles tensed, and a low, almost inaudible growl rumbled in his chest. "Someone's been here," Danny whispered to Rodriguez. "Recently." The evidence was subtle but unmistakable to trained eyes. Broken vegetation, disturbed soil, the absence of the small insects that would normally inhabit such a space. Rex's reaction confirmed what Danny suspected. This place had human significance. "We should get the lieutenant," Rodriguez suggested, his hand instinctively tightening on his rifle. Danny nodded, but before they could retreat, Rex's ears suddenly pricked forward. The dog froze completely, his attention locked on something beyond the cave entrance. Danny recognized this particular stillness. It wasn't fear, but intense focus, the posture Rex adopted when detecting human presence. "Down," Danny commanded in a whisper, pulling Rodriguez to a crouching position behind a fallen log. Rex obediently flattened himself against the ground, eyes never leaving the cave entrance. For several long minutes they remained motionless. The jungle sounds, bird calls, insect buzzing, the gentle trickle of water, continued uninterrupted around them. Just as Danny began to think Rex might have reacted to wildlife, a shadow moved within the darkness of the cave. The figure that emerged moved with careful deliberation, a Japanese soldier, his uniform dirt-stained and worn, carrying a small canvas bag. He paused at the entrance, scanning the ravine with practiced caution before moving toward the stream. Danny placed a restraining hand on Rex, who remained perfectly still despite his obvious tension. The soldier knelt by the water, filling a canteen, his back to their position. "He's alone," Rodriguez whispered, barely audible. "Scout, maybe." Danny wasn't convinced. The soldier's movements were too purposeful, too regular. This wasn't a scout, but someone performing a routine task, which suggested others nearby. "We need to get back to the patrol," Danny breathed. Carefully, they began their retreat, moving backward with painstaking slowness to avoid disturbing the vegetation. Rex followed Danny's silent hand signals perfectly, staying low and quiet. They had almost reached the bend in the ravine when Rodriguez's foot dislodged a small stone, sending it tumbling into the stream with a splash that seemed deafeningly loud in the tense silence. The Japanese soldier spun around, hand moving to his sidearm. For a frozen moment, his eyes swept the ravine, but incredibly he failed to spot the Americans in the dappled shadows. After a tense pause, he seemed to dismiss the sound as wildlife, returning to his task. Danny exhaled slowly, locking eyes with Rodriguez in a silent command to remain absolutely still. They waited until the soldier had finished filling his canteen and disappeared back into the cave before continuing their cautious retreat. When they finally rejoined the patrol, Danny immediately reported their discovery to Lieutenant Wilson, who listened with growing concern. "A cave that size could shelter a significant number of troops," Wilson concluded, "and if they're collecting water openly, they likely feel secure in their position." "There's more, sir," Danny added. "The entrance is well concealed from aerial observation, but it provides a clear line of sight down the ravine. If anyone were to move troops through here, they'd be walking into a perfect ambush position," Wilson finished grimly. "This could be how they've been anticipating our movements." The lieutenant made a quick decision. "We're heading back to report this immediately. This changes the operational picture for tomorrow's advance." As the patrol prepared to move out, Danny knelt beside Rex, rubbing the dog's ears gratefully. "Good boy," he murmured. "You saw what we couldn't." Rex leaned into Danny's touch, his amber eyes reflecting unwavering trust. In that moment, Danny felt the weight of their partnership. How many lives might depend on this bond between man and dog? The patrol began their return journey through the thickening afternoon heat, moving with heightened caution now that they knew what lay in these jungles. As they navigated the difficult terrain, Danny reflected on the training instructor's words months ago. These dogs don't just detect danger, they understand intention. Sometimes they'll sense a threat before it fully materializes. Looking at Rex trotting faithfully beside him, Danny wondered what other warnings the dog might be trying to communicate, and whether they would understand in time. The next morning dawned with the oppressive humidity that preceded the afternoon rains. Based on the patrol's report, Command had adjusted their strategy. The main company would now avoid the ravine entirely, instead establishing observation posts to monitor the cave entrance from a safe distance. Danny and Rex had been assigned to one such position, along with Corporal Mitchell and a radio man, Private First Class George Cooper, a former journalism student from Chicago, whose quick wit masked a thoughtful nature. Their observation post was situated on a small ridge overlooking the western approach to the ravine, providing good visibility while remaining concealed in the thick jungle canopy. "Hard to believe we almost walked right into that," Cooper remarked quietly as they settled into position. "The whole company could have been caught in a crossfire." Danny adjusted his field glasses, scanning the distant cave entrance. "That's why we bring the dogs. Rex knew something was off before any of us had a clue." Mitchell, who was carefully mapping the terrain features in his notebook, glanced at Rex with newfound respect. The German shepherd lay alertly beside Danny, his ears constantly moving to track the sounds around them. "How does he do it? Smell? Hearing?" Mitchell asked. "Both," Danny replied. "But it's more than that. The trainers talked about something they called integration of senses. Rex doesn't just hear or smell things separately. He puts together a complete picture of his environment. When something disrupts that picture, even slightly, he notices." Their conversation fell silent as Rex suddenly raised his head, looking intently toward their left flank. Danny followed his gaze but saw nothing unusual in the dense vegetation. "What is it, boy?" he whispered. Rex remained focused, a low whine building in his throat. Danny had learned to interpret this particular sound. Not danger exactly, but something that required attention. "Mitchell, cover our position. Cooper, stay on the radio. I'm going to check it out with Rex." Danny moved quietly through the undergrowth, following Rex's lead. They hadn't gone more than 50 yards when the dog stopped, pointing his nose toward a narrow animal trail that descended the ridge toward a small clearing below. Danny crouched, observing carefully. After several minutes, movement caught his eye. 2 Japanese soldiers emerging from the jungle on the far side of the clearing. They moved with purpose, checking the ground as if following a trail, then disappeared into the foliage, heading in the direction of their observation post. "Scouts," Danny realized. "They're checking their perimeter." He and Rex quietly retreated to their position, where Danny immediately reported what they'd seen. "They're being thorough," Mitchell observed grimly. "Might have noticed signs of our patrol yesterday." Cooper finished transmitting the information to Command. "Orders are to maintain position, but increase alertness. They want to know if there's any unusual activity around the cave." The hours passed, with excruciating slowness. The afternoon brought a brief rain shower that left everything dripping and somehow even more humid than before. Throughout the day, they observed several more Japanese soldiers emerging from and returning to the cave, confirming their suspicion that it housed a significant force. As evening approached, bringing welcome relief from the heat, Lieutenant Wilson arrived with a small detachment to relieve them. "Good work today," Wilson told them quietly. "Intelligence thinks this might be an advance headquarters. They're planning a coordinated operation, but they need more information first." Danny nodded, understanding the implications. "When do we move out, sir?" "Dawn. Get some rest while you can. We'll be establishing a new observation post closer to the northern approach." Wilson glanced at Rex, who was sitting attentively at Danny's side. "Your dog up for another long day tomorrow?" "Always, sir," Danny replied with quiet confidence. They made their way back to the company's temporary base camp, a carefully concealed collection of small shelters tucked beneath the jungle canopy. After feeding Rex and seeing to his needs, Danny joined Mitchell and Rodriguez at their small cooking fire, where Cooper was brewing coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. "To Rex," Cooper proposed, raising his tin cup. "The best scout in the Pacific." The others raised their cups in agreement, and Danny felt a surge of pride as he glanced at the dog resting nearby, ever vigilant even in repose. "You know, my grandfather trained hunting dogs back in Massachusetts," Danny shared, accepting a plate of field rations. "He used to say, 'A good dog will do what you tell him. A great dog will do what you need before you know to ask. Rex is that kind of dog. The conversation drifted to homes and families, the lives they'd left behind and hoped to return to someday. Danny spoke of his plans to study veterinary medicine on the GI Bill, inspired by his work with Rex. As night settled fully over the jungle, they finally sought their bedrolls, knowing dawn would come all too soon. Danny's sleep was restless, filled with half-formed dreams of home mixed with the ever-present tension of combat. He woke shortly after midnight to find Rex sitting up, ears forward, eyes focused on the darkness beyond their shelter. "What is it, boy?" he whispered, instantly alert. The dog's posture wasn't alarmed, but attentive, as if he'd heard something just at the edge of perception. Danny listened but could detect nothing beyond the normal night sounds of the jungle. Unable to return to sleep and trusting Rex's instincts, Danny quietly rose and moved to the edge of the camp, where the night sentry stood watch. "Anything unusual?" he asked the sentry, Private Jenkins. "All quiet," Jenkins replied. "Too quiet, maybe. Haven't heard much wildlife for the past hour." Danny frowned, looking back at Rex, who had followed him and now stood alertly at his side. The dog's attention remained fixed on the northern perimeter of the camp. "I'm going to walk the line with Rex," Danny decided, "just to be sure." They moved carefully around the camp's edge, Rex leading slightly ahead, his nose working constantly. Near the northern perimeter, the dog suddenly stopped, his body tensing in a way Danny recognized immediately. He had detected human scent. Danny signaled to the nearest sentry, pointing toward the area Rex was focused on. The sentry nodded in understanding and raised his rifle, ready. Slowly, deliberately, Danny and Rex advanced toward a dense thicket about 20 yards beyond the camp's established perimeter. They had covered half the distance when Rex froze completely, a behavior he had been trained to exhibit when detecting an imminent threat. Danny dropped to one knee, straining his eyes to penetrate the darkness beneath the jungle canopy. For several long moments, nothing moved. Then, with shocking suddenness, a figure bolted from the thicket, sprinting away from the camp. Rex lunged forward, but Danny held him back, recognizing the tactical situation immediately. This wasn't an attacker, but an observer, likely a scout who had been monitoring their position. "Alert!" Danny called out, loud enough to be heard throughout the camp. "Northern perimeter!" The camp erupted into controlled action as soldiers grabbed weapons and moved to defensive positions. Lieutenant Wilson appeared at Danny's side within moments. "Scout," Danny explained quickly. "Ran off heading north-northeast. Rex detected him hiding in the brush watching our camp." Wilson's expression was grim. "If they're scouting our base position at night, they're planning something," Danny finished. The camp remained on high alert for the rest of the night, but no attack materialized. When dawn finally broke, Lieutenant Wilson called the squad leaders together. "Command believes the Japanese forces are preparing for a strategic withdrawal," he informed them. "But they're likely to hit our forward positions before they pull back. We need to confirm their movements without engaging." Wilson turned to Danny. "Brooks, you and Rex will accompany me and a small team. We need to get eyes on that cave again, see what they're planning." The reconnaissance team consisted of Wilson, Danny and Rex, Cooper with his radio, and 2 experienced scouts. They moved through the jungle with practiced silence, taking a circuitous route to approach their previous observation post from an unexpected direction. As they neared the ridge, Rex's demeanor changed subtly, a tension in his body that Danny had learned to read as caution rather than immediate danger. He signaled to Wilson, who called a halt. "Something's different," Danny whispered, watching Rex carefully. "He's sensing a change in the environment." Wilson studied the terrain ahead. "Could be an ambush, could be they've moved on." After a brief consultation, they decided to continue with extreme caution, using Rex's reactions as an early warning system. They advanced slowly, stopping frequently to listen and observe, until they reached a position that offered a view of both the ravine and the cave entrance. What they saw confirmed Command's assessment. Increased activity around the cave suggested preparation for movement. Supplies were being gathered, equipment packed. "Looks like they're pulling out," Wilson observed through his field glasses. "But heading where?" Cooper was carefully documenting the activity, noting times and numbers. "If they're repositioning rather than retreating, we need to know." They maintained their observation for nearly 3 hours, recording the Japanese troop movements. The pattern suggested a withdrawal to the north, potentially to join larger forces in the mountains. As they prepared to return with their intelligence, disaster struck without warning. A hidden Japanese sniper, positioned in the canopy above the cave entrance, opened fire. The first shot struck the ground inches from Cooper, sending dirt spraying into his face. "Cover!" Wilson shouted as they all dove for protection. Danny pulled Rex down beside him behind a fallen tree trunk, his heart pounding. The sniper fired again, the bullet splintering bark just above their position. They were pinned down, the sniper having the advantage of both elevation and concealment. "Can anyone see him?" Wilson called out. "Negative," came the tense replies. Cooper was attempting to reach command on the radio, but the thick jungle canopy was interfering with transmission. "No contact," he reported grimly. Another shot rang out, followed by a sharp cry of pain from Wilson. Danny looked over to see the lieutenant clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "Sir!" Danny moved to help, but was forced back by another shot that kicked up dirt at his feet. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Wilson was wounded. They couldn't spot the sniper, and they had no communication with base. With each passing minute, the risk increased that more Japanese forces would arrive. Danny looked at Rex, who was watching him with complete focus, waiting for direction. In that moment, an idea formed, dangerous but possibly their only chance. "Lieutenant," Danny said urgently, "I need to send Rex forward." Wilson's face was pale from pain and blood loss, but his mind remained sharp. "What's your plan, Sergeant?" "Rex can move faster than any of us and lower to the ground. He can circle around and approach from behind. He's trained to bark when he locates a hidden target. It might distract the sniper enough for us to spot him." Wilson considered this briefly, then nodded. "Do it." Danny reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cloth item, a worn handkerchief that he'd carried throughout the war. It had been a gift from his mother, embroidered with his initials. Throughout their training and deployment, he had used it in scent-tracking exercises with Rex. He held the cloth to Rex's nose. "Find them, boy," he commanded softly, using the specific phrase that Rex had been trained to associate with detecting hidden human presence. Rex's eyes locked with Danny's, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Then, without hesitation, the dog slipped away, moving through the undergrowth with a fluid grace that made him nearly invisible. The minutes that followed were among the longest of Danny's life. The sniper continued to fire occasionally, keeping them pinned down while Wilson's condition slowly worsened. Cooper had given up on the radio and was now applying pressure to the lieutenant's wound. Then, from somewhere to their right, came the sound they had been waiting for. Rex's sharp, authoritative bark, followed immediately by movement in the trees as the sniper shifted position in surprise. "There!" one of the scouts called out, spotting the sniper's new position. 2 quick shots later, and the threat was eliminated. But where was Rex? Danny called out anxiously, "Rex, come!" For several heart-stopping moments, there was no response. Then, emerging from the dense undergrowth, came Rex, moving more slowly now, but with his head held high. As he approached, Danny saw with horror that the dog was favoring his left side, where a dark stain spread across his tawny fur. "Rex!" Danny rushed forward, gathering the brave dog gently in his arms. The wound was serious but not immediately life-threatening. A bullet had grazed Rex's side, leaving a deep furrow in his flesh. With the sniper eliminated, the team quickly organized their withdrawal. Cooper and one of the scouts supported Wilson, while Danny carried Rex, refusing to leave the loyal dog behind despite the added difficulty. Their return to base was a blur of pain and determination. The medical team immediately attended to Wilson, whose prognosis was good, despite significant blood loss. To Danny's relief and gratitude, the company's medic had experience treating the K9 units and set about cleaning and bandaging Rex's wound with the same care afforded to the human casualties. That evening, as Danny sat beside Rex's resting form in the medical tent, Lieutenant Wilson stopped by, his arm in a sling, but his color much improved. "How's our hero doing?" he asked, nodding toward Rex. "Doc says he'll recover fully," Danny replied, his hand resting gently on Rex's head. "Says he's the toughest patient he's had all month. Wilson smiled slightly. Command received our intel. It confirmed their assessment. The Japanese forces are conducting a strategic withdrawal to defensive positions in the mountains. The entire operation has been recalibrated based on what we learned. He paused, looking directly at Danny. You and Rex saved a lot of lives today, Brooks. Not just ours. Danny nodded, emotion making it difficult to speak. He knew what needed to be done, he said finally. Somehow he always knows. 2 weeks later, as the campaign for Luzon continued pushing northward, Danny stood before the company commander, Rex, at his side. Though still healing, the dog stood proudly, seemingly aware of the solemnity of the occasion. Sergeant Daniel Brooks and K9 Rex, the commander announced, for exceptional valor and service during operations on Luzon Island, I am authorized to present you both with the Bronze Star for bravery under fire and actions that directly contributed to the preservation of American lives. As the medal was pinned first to Danny's uniform, then symbolically attached to Rex's K9 harness, Danny reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From those first tentative days of training to this moment of recognition, their bond had been forged through challenges that would have seemed impossible to overcome alone. Later that evening, as Danny sat outside their tent watching the sunset paint the Philippine sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Rex rested his head on Danny's lap, content in the presence of his handler and friend. You know, boy, Danny said softly, stroking the dog's ears, when this is all over, you're coming home with me, that's a promise. Rex looked up at him with those intelligent amber eyes, and Danny could swear he saw understanding there, a recognition that their story together was far from over. In the months and years to come, as they completed their service and eventually returned to a Massachusetts town where Danny would open his veterinary practice with Rex always at his side, they would carry this moment with them, this truth they had discovered in the jungles of Luzon, that true loyalty isn't measured in grand gestures, but in the quiet, unshakable decision to stand by someone when everything else falls away. If you've been moved by Rex and Danny's journey, their extraordinary bond and the courage they showed in the face of danger, please consider subscribing to our channel. Each week, we bring you powerful, historically inspired stories that remind us of the connections that define our humanity, even in our darkest hours. By subscribing, you'll join a community of history enthusiasts who value these forgotten moments that deserve to be remembered. Hit subscribe now and be part of preserving these stories of courage, loyalty, and hope for generations to come. Your support allows us to continue uncovering and sharing these remarkable human narratives that might otherwise be lost to time.